Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Walking Through the Book of Exodus. I'm your host, Ruel Barksdale. And today we're going to look at chapter 13, Stranger Danger. Subtitle, Me Too. So get your Bible, get your electronic devices, get paper, get pencil as we walk through this book of Exodus, chapter 13. Last week, we looked at an introduction to this book. And in the introduction, we saw how God was getting ready for people to move. Now listen, let me tell you this. When God has promised you something, God's not slack on his promises. And he's never late. So when you understand that God is never late, you wait differently. Now the children of Israel have been waiting a long time. Remember, we talked about how God went to Abram way back in Genesis. Genesis 12th chapter, he said, leave everything, leave your family, leave your fame, leave your fortune, leave your friends, and go to a land that I'll show you. And Abram does something that I don't know if too many of us could do it. There was not a pause, there was not a period, there was not a comma. He left immediately. And because of that, God tells him, through you, not because of you, not by you, but through you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And so it doesn't matter whether you're a Christian, whether you practice Judaism, whether you practice the Islam faith. Everybody goes back to Abraham. Through you, Abram, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. That's what we need in the 21st century. We need an immediate faith. We don't. It's not a faith like Moses, where God had to go back and forth with him for about 2 chapters before he finally just went ahead and did what God told him to do. In the 12th chapter of Genesis, Abram is told to leave. He leaves. No question, no thought, no, where am I going? No, nothing. I'll show you when you get there. Now, I want to go back even prior to that. Let's go back to Genesis, the 9th chapter. Because in Genesis, the 9th chapter, we have something that's going to lead us to stranger danger in the 13th chapter of Exodus. In the 9th chapter of Genesis, you'll remember that that the earth had been destroyed by a flood. And Noah and his wife and his sons finally get off the boat. Okay, this is where we pick this up. The 9th chapter, let's start with verse, I believe, 18. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These were the 3 sons of Noah, and from them came the people who were scattered all over the earth. And now I'm going to go down to, I'll just keep reading it. Noah, a man of the soil. What does that mean? He was a farmer. Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw that his father was naked and told his 2 brothers. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders. Then they walked in backward and covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned the other way so that they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and found out what had happened, found out what the youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan. The lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers." Now look. There is some erroneous theology that black people are cursed because of Ham. That Ham was cursed, and because of that, no matter where we go, no matter what we do, we're going to be cursed. First of all, Ham wasn't cursed, Canaan was. And Noah was just about drunk when he did it. But we're going to see the descendants of Canaan in a precarious position. They're in the land that God had promised to Abram, that God would promise to Abram. And Abram's not on the scene yet. But who are the descendants of Canaan? You've got the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. All of them were descendants of Canaan. And then you got the Philistines. They were probably of Greek origin. What am I trying to say? In the promised land, sometimes there's stranger danger. Sometimes in the promised land, the land that God has showed you, the position that God has showed you, the level that God has showed you, sometimes there's stranger danger. And the children of Israel would have to learn how to fight to inhabit what God had given them. And they're not ready for it yet. That's why God doesn't even allow them to go through where the Philistines are. They're not ready for that yet. But there would come a time where there'd be a young man named David who would stand up in front of Goliath. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should talk to the armies of the Lord? What? Listen, if there's a Goliath in front of you, that means there must be a David inside of you. That means you must have gone to the place where you're ready. We're going to look at this 13th chapter of Exodus, and we're going to see after the plagues, after God has told them to put the blood on the doorpost. And when I see the blood on the doorpost and on the sides of the door, I will pass over you. That's why they celebrate the Passover today. And then after the Passover, you're going to have 7 days of unleavened bread. You're going to have a feast of unleavened bread. You're going to walk in a type of purity after the Passover. My brothers and sisters, Christ died on Passover. We couldn't walk worthy. We couldn't walk upright. We couldn't walk with any kind of purity until the blood was showed. And now the blood is showed. The blood is shared, because now when God sees his children, he doesn't see your faults. He doesn't see your failures. He doesn't see your frustrations. He doesn't see your misgivings. He sees the blood. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. He had given Pharaoh and the Egyptians 9 chances through all kinds of plagues. And Pharaoh would say, who is your God? I don't know him. I know the God of the sun. I know the God of nature. I know this, that, and the other God. I don't know who your God. I don't know him. And these are my people. I'm talking about let your people go. They're my slaves. Matter of fact, I'm going to make it harder on them. And prior to that, he had said, when you see a male child being born, I want you to kill him. Moses somehow escaped that verdict, killing. And God's going to say, okay. After the Passover, after they've walked in purity, after they've had the Feast of Unleavened Bread, I'm going to tell them what they're going to do when they get into the land that was promised to Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. Now the firstborn, they're going to belong to me. You see, the children of Israel were the firstborn. And the firstborn of the firstborn would be dedicated to God. Why would I say they're the first? Because they were the first chosen people. And the beautiful thing is, as we look through the book of Exodus, as we look through Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, as we look through the Judges and the Kings, as we look through the whenever God is doing something for his people of the Old Testament, for his chosen people, the church of the New Testament can say, me too. If God told them they would be the lender and not the borrower, me too. If God told them they would be the head and not the tail, me too. If God told them, I will be your God and you will be my people, me too. Stranger danger in the land, yes. But God is a deliverer. God is a healer. God is a waymaker. And when we're ready, stranger danger can't stop us from being what God called. There might be Hittites. There might be Jebusites. There might be Amorites. There might be Canaanites. There might be people that came out of the sickness of Cain. But if God has promised you something, God is not slack concerning his promises. All right, let's go to let's go get into this 13th chapter and see what's happening with the children of Israel in the 13th chapter of Exodus. And it starts this way. The Lord said to Moses, consecrate to me every firstborn male. The first offering of every womb among the Israelites belongs to me. It doesn't belong to Pharaoh. It doesn't even belong to you. It belongs to me. And you see, there's something about the firstborn in the Old Testament. The firstborn had a place of preeminence, the firstborn prominence, the first power, prestige. The firstborn was most likely to sit on the throne. The firstborn got the lion's share of the inheritance. The firstborn was seen as something special. And God is saying, Israel is my firstborn. They're my children. They belong to me. And the firstborn of the firstborn, I want you to set them aside. They belong to me. Then Moses said to the people, commemorate this day, the day you came out of Egypt. Commemorate this day. Don't forget it. Remember it. Tell your children about it. Tell your sons and daughters about it. In the 21st century, there is this untheological move to forget history. As if we don't talk about it, then it didn't happen. And there are people that say, well, I don't want to talk about it because it'll hurt my children's feelings. The purpose of history isn't to help or to hurt. It's not to make you feel good to feel bad. The purpose of history is to educate you, so that you know what your roots are, so that you know where you came from, so that you know what has happened before you, so that you know that time did not begin with you. There are lessons that we must learn from history so we don't repeat them. But if we never talk about history, our children don't know what we won't teach. We have a responsibility to teach history, so the faults and the failures of our past don't come and get us in the 21st century. We look at history and say, well, that could never happen again. Yes, it can. If we act like it never happened before. Then Moses said to the people, commemorate this day, the day you came out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery, because the Lord brought you out of it with a mighty hand. Eat nothing. And see, this is the thing. Sometimes when God delivers us, we forget. We don't commemorate. We don't celebrate. But what God is saying now is this: is from now until the end of time, this is what I want you. I want you to remember. I want you to commemorate. I want you to have a Passover holiday, holy day. I want you to have the feast of unleavened bread. This is going to help you to remember what I did for you. Because if you don't remember what I did for you, you won't praise me like I need to be praised. You won't worship me like I need to be worshipped. Commemorate this day, the day you came out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery, because the Lord brought you out with a mighty hand. Eat nothing containing yeast. Today, in the month of Abib, you are leaving, when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, the land he swore to your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He swore that he was going to give it to you, a land flowing with milk and honey. You are to observe this ceremony. In this month, for 7 days, eat bread made without yeast. And on the seventh day, hold a festival to the Lord. I want you to be pure. I want you to be holy. And then I want you to celebrate. I don't want you to just remember. I don't want you to just commemorate. I want you to celebrate what I've done for you. But you got to remember it. You can't erase it from history like it didn't happen. Eat unleavened bread during these 7 days. Nothing with yeast in it is to be seen among you. You shall, nor any yeast to be seen anywhere within your borders. On that day, tell your son, I do this because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. Don't forget your history. Teach it. This observance will be for you like a sign on your hand and a reminder on your forehead that the law of the Lord is to be on your lips, for the Lord brought you out of Egypt with a mighty hand. You must keep this ordinance at the appointed time, year after year after year after year after year. After the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites and gives it to you as he promised on oath to you and your forefathers, you are to give over to the Lord the first. Don't do it yet. See, there are certain things you do on the way to the promised land, and there are certain things that you do in the promised land. There are certain things you do in preparation for inhabiting what God told you, and there are certain things that you do once you inhabit what God told you. After the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites and gives it to you as he promised on oath, to you and your forefathers, you are to give over to the Lord the first offspring of every womb. All the firstborn males of your livestock belong to the Lord. Redeem with a lamb every firstborn donkey. But if you do not redeem it, break its neck. Redeem every firstborn among your sons. In days to come, when your son asks you, what does this mean? Say to him, with a mighty hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. And I want you to also understand this. When God delivers you from something, last week we talked about strongholds, and the stronghold is just something that holds you strong. You can't get away. You're twisting and you're turning and you're trying to get free, but it's too strong for you. When God delivers you, don't go back. Remember it, but don't go back. Remember it, but don't return to what God freed you from. And one of the reasons why we're going to commemorate every year what God did is so we won't go back. We won't think it wasn't as bad as it was. We won't think that God didn't deliver us from anything that bad. I want you to tell your son, I want you to let him know that I had to bring you out with a mighty hand. Tell him about the 10 plagues. Tell him about Pharaoh. Tell him about the Red Sea. Tell him about the blood on the doorpost. Tell him about tell him. In days to come, when when your son asks you, what does this mean? With a mighty hand, the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed every firstborn in Egypt, both man and animal. This is why I sacrifice to the Lord the first male offspring of every womb, and redeem each of my firstborn sons. And it will be like a sign on your hand and a symbol on your forehead that the Lord brought you out of Egypt with a mighty hand. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country. Listen, if there had been a straight line between Egypt and the Promised Land, it would have taken maybe 3 to 5 months. Some theologians said it would have taken the 2,000 men, women, children, and cattle maybe a year at most. It took them 40 years. Some of you are wondering, why is it taking so long for God to do what he said he was going to do? But when you realize that God is never late, you wait differently. They weren't ready for the Promised Land. And if they had gone into a straight line, they would have had to go up against the Philistines. They weren't ready for the Philistines, not now. You see, when you've been a slave for 430 years, you have a slave mentality. And God would have to get them out of that slave mentality so they would be fit to enter into the Promised Land. Oh, they're going to get there, but it's going to be a while. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was the shorter route. For God said if they faced war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. Well, at least we had 3 hots in the cot. At least we got fed every day. At least we didn't have to worry about going to war with people. I mean, it was rough. But at least we knew how we were going to eat. At least we knew how we were going to live. They're not ready yet. So God led the people around by the desert toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt armed for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made him on an oath, say he made him swear an oath, and he said that God will surely come for you, and then you must carry my bones. I'll be dead, but you carry my bones up out of here, because this isn't my resting place. My resting place is the land that God promised our forefathers. After leaving Succoth, they camped on Etham, on the edge of the desert. By day the Lord went ahead of them with a pillar of clouds, and by night with a pillar of fire, that their way might be night in the pillar of, but they might see in the night by the pillar of fire, and in the day by the pillar of clouds. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. You see, what God is leading you to, He's leading you in front of you. He's not asking you to look back. Oh, remember your history, but don't take any steps back. I'll lead you. May our footsteps be ordered by the Lord. I'll lead you. There's stranger danger out there, so I'm not going to take you through some lands. I know that seems like it would be a shorter place. I know that would seem like it would be a quicker time for you to get to where I told you you're going to get. Trust me. In the 21st century, God is still asking, can you trust me? To get you to where I want you to be. To get you to where I promise you to be. Can you trust me? To get that slave, whatever was holding you strongly, to get that out of you, so that when you inhabit the promised land, you'll be worthy of the land that I promised you. Next week we're going to look at the actual Exodus. This book is entitled Exodus, but we're going to actually go step by step through it next week. It's a beautiful thing. And what's beautiful for me is that God is taking some of you right now. You're at a place in your life where you're leaving what has held you bound, where you're leaving what has enslaved you, where you're leaving what has had you in bondage. And my brother, my sister, my words of encouragement to you is, there might not be a pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night, but there will be leading. There will be an ordering of your steps. And you'll see things that how did this happen? How did I get favor with that person? How did that door open? Because God is leading you where He wants you to be. And He's leading you in a way that you will know it's God and not you. Have you ever been in a situation where something, you were in a bad place, you didn't know how you were going to make it? The doctor might have given you a bad report. The supervisor may have given you a bad report. You got a bad call for your son or your daughter. You got a bad call from your spouse, and you were in a corner, and God stepped in. Thank God in the 21st century, He's stepping in. And sometimes there's stranger danger all around us. Sometimes we can't get to where we're trying to get to because there are people that are blocking our path. And sometimes God has to take us away. There's stranger danger. But the thing I love about God is that He never changes. There is no shadow of turning with Him. And so, whatever God promised the children of the Old Testament, whatever God promised His firstborn of the Old Testament, whatever God promised His people of the Old Testament, when I'm under the blood, when I'm covered by the blood, when I've accepted Christ as my personal Savior, I can say, me too. If He said you will be the lender and not the borrower, me too. If He said that you would be the head and not the tail, me too. If He said I'm going to lead you to the promised land, me too. Next week, please don't miss next week. We're going to see some miracles. What is a miracle? A miracle is something that happens where you know it was humanly impossible, and yet it happened. We're going to see a miracle. We're going to see miracles. And even the thing about miracles, me too. If God did miracles for His people of the Old Testament, me too. So listen, tell a friend, tell an enemy about our walk through this phenomenal book of Exodus. And maybe by next week, when the time is over, you and your enemy will be friends. I love you. God loves you more. See you next week. Chapter 14. Bye-bye.